Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of my Immigrant Diary, the space where we unpack the journeys, the struggles, and the headlines that defines the immigrant experience. As always, my name is Precious, and with me is my brother Wally. Wally, how you doing?
I'm doing well, doing very well. Happy to be here today. So I'm looking forward to the series of topics today. So yes, I'm good.
All right, great. So we're gonna unpack a few things, but before we do that, um, one of the exciting things that's happened to me personally, I don't like to talk about my personal stories like that, is the fact that I started cycling and I cannot stop, I cannot get enough of it. I feel like I should have started cycling a long time ago. And I read somewhere that it's like a drug. You get addicted, you start with slowly, and before you know, you just keep taking more and more and more. And that's just the way it's become for me now. It's like if you go to my reels or my Instagram videos or the videos I watch online, it's just everything about cycling, cycling, cycling. And I'm like that. When I get into something, I just go all out into it. But this is something new and it's just maybe it's exciting. And I realized that doing new things really is good for us as people. And I've been impacted by that recently with cycling. Wale,
I
what are
think
your thoughts?
cycling is in general is like that. A few years ago I was also into cycling before I moved to the United States, and I just started trying it out, and just to see how it feels like and how I'm gonna like it. And before you know it, like I was busy pretty much cycling every day, cycling everywhere I went, basically pretty much, except for if I'm traveling outside the country, then yes, I will use an airplane. But I totally understand how you feel.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. I mean, they talk about Europe is more cycling friendly than America. And I mean, my lifestyle will not permit me to cycle everywhere I go. I wish I could. Honestly, it's just something I'm excited about. Our first story touches on something every immigrant fears: putting your trust and your hard earned money into the hands of a professional only to get burned. Immigration and Custom Enforcement, ICE, is seeking a fine of over $474,000 against a New York attorney. Authorities allege he submitted over 118 fraudulent documents on behalf of his client. This is huge and this is heartbreaking, especially for many of the clients who are hoping to get processing, document immigration processing through this lawyer. Wally?
Yes, this is so sad. And many of the documents that you filed were for asylum seekers. And basically, the red flag came about when they noticed that all the persecution stories were pretty much the same. It was just like, how can this person experience the same thing as this person? And not just one person, but dozens of people. So it looks like he didn't even bother to do a little bit of homework to get the information from the clients to file the right claims for each client. He just, somehow found a list of asylum seekers and then put the same story for all of them. So it looks like he was just interested in the financial aspect of it, which is sad because this person is a qualified lawyer, qualified to practice in the United States, and you want to, as someone who is seeking to walk through, who is seeking whether it's asylum or even any other kind of immigration case, you look for professionals to be able to get help that you believe is going to be lawful and is going to be valid for your case. But unfortunately, you just have people who are unethical and greedy. Unfortunately.
Yeah, it's quite unfortunate that these things kind of happen. But like you mentioned, submitting repeated application is just lazy work. You get
Extremely lazy.
it's just
Extremely.
just lazy work for someone who's a professional. It's unacceptable, unethical, and anything you can add to that. But
How do you even, I'm just thinking about it. If you think about someone who's seeking asylum, usually they're in a vulnerable position and they are trying to get, as the any kind of help that they seems to be valid. They are trying to get that. What I'm thinking, how do you even identify who's real or not, who wants to help you or not, especially when you're in a vulnerable position, you're trying to you're escaping some sort of persecution, you really want to make provide a better life for either yourself or you and your family. How do you identify who might be fraudulent or not? I don't know how that's possible.
yeah, that's a very difficult position for anyone to be in because it's difficult to identify, who is genuine. In addition, there are so many others along the way to add to that. Do you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things we established over the course of talking about cases of immigration, especially with activities of ICE and deportation, one thing that is clear in America, status to work is not the same thing as status to stay. That is something we've established. So to even get to that, point where you get status to work, to get status to stay is still in front. Talk about the fact that someone is already, putting your worst foot forward without you knowing it, So it's just terrible. In all the angles we can think about, it's a very, very terrible. And I feel sorry for most of those 118 people who are behind those applications. That's the people I think about in this case. Moving on to Sweden, for a story that kind of sounds like something straight out of a movie. At the annual Gothia Cup, which is one of the world's biggest youth football tournaments held in Gothenburg, Sweden, about 20 Ethiopian youth players and team leaders went completely missing right around the day of the final. Well, if you don't understand this story, when we see the headline, we know what this kind of story is about. The global community might be stunned, but we understand the story because we understand that tournaments like this are opportunities for exposure. And when people who are coming from maybe difficult situation or difficult, communities from developing nations go to tournaments like this and experience the exposure, the tendency is that when they get missing, they're not actually missing. Wally?
Yes, it is. I don't know, because if you think about it from a Western point of view, these kinds of things are not common. Like, you don't expect it to happen, or even from a developed country point of view. We grew up in Nigeria, so we understand the level of desperation that exists. The first part is the economic part, that's the poverty level. And then the second part also, some people do fall into the category of being persecuted. And then you have all those tough situations that a lot of people thrive through to, try to make something out of their lives. And then you have this group of people who have been able to become a part of the youth football team. So, no matter how much I explain, I don't think, Western audience is going to understand what it means for these people and for them to give up their legality, so to speak, and then just disappear. Another way I'm thinking about is that when I read these kind of stories, it is unfortunate. It just tells you that there's still a lot of challenges that we need to deal with in countries like, is it Eritrea that they're from? Basically in countries like...
from Ethiopia.
Yes, in countries like Ethiopia. So even though you do have a lot of world-class Ethiopia that don't do this, you see others that do this. So I don't know. It's sad to hear this kind of stories.
I mean, it's a double-edged sword because it kind of puts strain on, future athletes who are trying to get visas to, go for the similar tournament. Because, for instance, some of the players from Ethiopia in the future or in the next tournament might just find it difficult to get visas. Do you get what I'm saying? To be able to go for that tournament again. But nevertheless, these are the realities that happen, especially for, with immigrants. But that's not the end of it. It's not going to be the end of it because there were reports of people from different part of developing nations who attended the World Cup in US, Canada, and Mexico. And there have been stories of a couple of people who have applied for asylum in Canada, for example.
Many did apply for asylum, yes.
Exactly. We talked about that story, if I remember correctly, Riley, about the story of that nature where people who attended the World Cup from, some developing countries who did not return and apply for asylum.
Even
and
Iran,
even
the
the US.
Happened with Iran. I don't know if you heard about it. The women's, I think it was the women's.
Yeah, I think it was the women's team when they went to Australia.
Somewhere there, I don't remember.
Yeah, somewhere in Australia, they had something similar, but their case was huge. Was in the news, was everywhere because they didn't want to go back because they feared for their safety. So that case was a more genuine. They didn't go missing, but it was a more genuine case of running from oppression,
it was
running from political instability.
Well-known case, I would say.
Yeah, it was a well-known case. It was all about the news, and I think the Australian government was trying to support their asylum case, given that there was a war at the time. There have been stories and evidence, or stories of over the years of what's it called, oppression, or will I say suppression, if lack of another word, of the woman rights in Iran. And so I think that was where some of this stem from. I don't know the full story. We can bring it up in the future, but I know it stemmed from something around, the way women have been treated in Iran and the fear for their safety. For the most part, that was what was said. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
Australia tried
So
to support them
yeah. So like
in
you
that
said,
case.
sorry, keep going if you keep
No, go
going.
ahead. I'm done.
So, like you said, it's something that is still happening all over the world, whether it's Ethiopia, whether it's Iran, whether it's any other country that they have some kind of challenge within the country. It just shows that a lot of people still would rather leave their homeland where they are born, where they have family and everything, to go and live in a strange country just because of the kind of extreme challenges and potentially dangerous situations that they are running from. It's for me, it just reminds me of why asylum is a good thing for from the either United States or the countries in Europe to the rest of the world.
Well said. From sport visas to diplomatic access, if you've ever tried booking a visa appointment at the US consulate abroad, you know how hard it already is. Well, brace yourself. Reports indicate that the US department is planning to close down several consulates across key locations, including Canada, Japan, and Indonesia.
Yes. When I first saw this news, I was reminded of the visa denial rate for Canada that the United States had. It looks like, yes, that might be due to the deteriorating relationship between the United States and Canada, but Japan, who has a fantastic relationship with the United States, is also included. So it didn't really make a lot of sense. This closure of consulates didn't make a lot of sense. I'm not sure if they're closing down the consulate, but they're definitely stopping visa processing in one of the consulates in Nigeria. I think the challenging part for individuals in these countries is, like you said, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to be able to apply for, whether it's a visa, whether it's any other kind of immigration document that you need, or any kind of file that you need. Even as citizens, usually the consulates also provide other kinds of services for their citizens abroad. So does that mean that United States citizens that are living around those consulates now have to go to other consulates now to go and get their documentations done? So those are the questions those are the things that is really going to affect the lives of people.
Yes, Wally, it is confusing. But one of the angles I want to take this is a couple of weeks back, we talked about the data that came out on the number of visa rejection from Canada. And we could not fully connect why that number is. But I think this kind of just answered that question, which is a lot of students, temporary residents in Canada, and other travelers who go to Canada apply for visas to US because they tend to cross the border often. And that largely accounts for the high number of visa rejection because Canadian citizens do not require visas to come to America. So while this fully explains why the visa rejection rate in Canada to America is so high, does that make sense?
Sorry.
It doesn't. Okay, let me explain again. So, like I said, a few weeks ago, we reported on the data that came out.
No, what I'm trying to understand is it that the visa closure explains why
no.
Yeah.
I'm saying the rejection rate. So this explains the rejection rate because if they are so US is considering closing down the consulate in Canada.
Mhm.
Now, this can be one of the reasons possibly is from the diplomatic relationship. That's one.
Mhm.
Another angle is the fact that there's an increased rejection applicants from Canada trying to come into the US who are from possibly and most likely from countries America have already banned. But people are applying because they're in a third country that is not they're in Canada, which is not on the ban list. So those individuals who are maybe temporary residents in Canada are applying for visa, ranking up the number of visa application to the US from Canada, because
So that's
Canadians
why
do
the
not need.
rejection rate is high. Okay.
Exactly, because Canadians do not need visas to come to America. I remember our conversation.
No, but
I
if
wish
you're a resident, you don't need a visa either.
No, if you're a temporary resident, so there are certain resident category. When I mean temporary residents, there are certain visas that allow you to stay for a period of years, maybe period of months, and all that. So those are temporary categories that can result to visa application to the US. That's what I mean. And in that case, they will add to the denier to the
Okay.
data. Do you get?
Okay. Okay.
So because that makes sense, because if you remember, we had the conversation, we're wondering why is Canada so visa rejection to US so high? If you remember, we had the conversation, we're not very clear on why. Even the story didn't expatiate it, but I think this connects it and just makes sense. Because now this is me deviating a bit from the fact that the US have decided to close down a consulate in Canada. This is me analyzing and understanding the connection from what we reported a few weeks ago to what is happening here, showing that if Canada is on that list, it's also possible that the visa rejection is as a result of the third countries, people from other countries applying for visas.
Okay.
But yeah, nevertheless, the fact here is beyond the US citizens who are in Canada that will be affected, other people who are trying to apply for visas or any other, documentation to come to the US would also be affected when consulates are closed like that. And so it will result in a lot of backlog.
Also, like consulates are not just for documentation alone. They are also US diplomats also operate from those consulates. So it looks like on the Wall Street, it looks like the US is withdrawing from those countries, which again, like I'm not sure how much sense that makes. But again, I don't have the data the president has, so they have all the right to do that.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, Canada and Japan, Indonesia, it's also possible that there are other citizens from other countries trying to go through those countries to apply for visas, which also contributes to why visas have been rejected, because those countries are also on the list, but I think now that makes sense in terms of people who are from countries with difficulty in getting visas are probably traveling and moving to other countries where they can easily apply for visas to come to the US. That is some of the connection we are beginning to see.
Travel all the way to Japan to apply for
No,
visa.
it might not necessarily be. It might be people from that region, because there are other countries around Japan, Asia. So that's what I'm saying. It can be people from those regions, not necessarily us from Africa traveling to Japan. I will not be surprised.
I don't think it makes sense to close down the consulate because of that. Then that's not
one of the reasons. I'm just talking about how the
visa rejection rate. Okay, all right.
That contributes to visa rejections from those countries. Yeah. But speaking of Canada, as we mentioned, official immigration removal statistics released for June 2026 show a sharp surge in enforcement that we already know. Over 10,600 deportations occurred in the month of June alone, with at least 205 Nigerians included in those figures. Furthermore, reports highlight that over 3,300 Indian nationals were deported from Canada in just the first half of 2026. Well, I'm surprised from a statistic. Not surprised in this case, but I'm intrigued because there are only 205 Nigerians in a score of 10,600, over 10,000, deportation. That was not my viewpoint. I was looking at India's number, over the span of 6 months, which average over 500 per month. I'm like, okay, there are other countries with more deportation from Canada than Nigeria. But now that you said that, that's a lot. I didn't think about in terms of the volume of all the other countries in the world. Oh my God, Wale, you're funny. That's so critical. I was trying to give us a positive score that, okay, my fellow Nigerians.
No, but like I think if you think about it, like it's not it's a modest number, but still, compared to like I'm just saying, if you take the pool of all the people that they deported, Nigeria is making up a significant amount of it. India is making up a significant amount of it. Obviously, there are 2 billion people over there. And you have other countries that also make some significant amounts. But I think the important thing here is that like deportations, even though Canada is not, as far as I know, as far as today is concerned, Canada is not as hard on immigration as the United States is right now, but it looks like the effect of what the United States is doing is getting to Canada. So because of what's happening here, Canada, for whatever reason, is also increasing its own deportation. So that means that if you are watching this, you should be on the path to get your documents sorted out as soon as possible. This is not the time to be postponing things, to be delaying things, to be thinking, no, get it sorted out as soon as possible, especially if you have a valid right to remain in a country, whether it's Canada or even anywhere else in the world. Make sure that if your document has an expiration date, make sure you start working on it as soon as possible. Get every document that you need to sort that out, to get them ready as soon as possible. I think for me, this is an indication of where the world is, at least North America is tilting towards.
Yeah, well spoken, Wale. I mean, there's a constant change in immigration currently globally. And so I think it's more of a general advice for people to really pay attention, because what might work for, person A in a year ago might not be the same, process and procedure today. So people need to keep themselves updated as they follow up with, immigration processes across countries, and Canada included in this case. Now, if you think that the Canada system is going through changes, right? Let's look at the United States. The official processing trend shows that the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services pending case backlog has reached a record-shattering 11.3 million cases. 11.3 million cases.
That is
that is insane.
That is like 10 Estonians.
This is okay. So this is not categories, just for clarification, not just because the other day we reported the asylum was already at 1 point something million.
Yeah,
so this is in all category of including temporary or permanent,
yes.
process.
But again, like I think
that's wild.
First of all, I didn't expect the number to get up to this, but if you think about what has been happening with the current administration, with all the revettings and the restructuring of the revetting processes, it's not too surprising. So what it means, if you're going to change a process, it's going to take some time to take off, especially if you're going to change it in the government. Even for things that are already established, for processes that are already established with government, it takes a while compared to the private sector. Not to now mention if you want to change a process, it is definitely going to take a while. So that means that USCIS is going to be working a lot slower. Unfortunately, you are going to. I don't see how the number is going to be better. Last week we reported about how the asylum process wants to be streamlined. I think maybe they saw this coming and they wanted to figure out how to make the process a little bit better so that they can reduce the backlog. Or it is a way to balance out the delay for the other categories and then improve the category for asylum. Or maybe it's just asylum that they want to start with and then before they now go through other processes. But, if like the administration has been saying since the start that they want to increase the amount of scrutiny that they are doing for each applicant or application, then it means that the process is going to be delayed. I remember we also spoke about this even for the students' visas, for that they were going to start including social media and other kinds of things to vet people. It means that those things are going to be delayed. So you have a situation where before it would take 1 year to 2 years if you're going to apply for an immigrant visa. Now, or a spousal visa, now it's probably going to take more time. That's what it means. So unfortunately, it's going to take more time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reality, but my mind is just, mind blowing to think about that kind of number.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm just thinking about the person who is the 11th million person in the application backlog. Like, when will it get to you?
I don't know. I don't know.
Like I don't think I'm just
Before,
like, you're just a more lighter note thinking about it like that. Like
yeah.
chronologically, like we really get to the 11th million person.
So
But
yeah, so it's no wonder why we see stories of people that have been deported when their documents
still in
have
the
not been
process.
approved,
Yeah, still in the
because
process.
the visa is obviously going to expire if your case is not attended to as soon as possible.
All right, finally, let's look at Europe. Recently, a major migration crisis has triggered emergency EU meeting following news of what happened in Ceuta, the Spanish enclave on the northern African coast of Morocco. Over 70,000 people crossed, or you can say attempted to cross the border to Europe. But note, the way the media reported it was like they have crossed to Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Ceuta is in Africa, is on the continent of Africa, is a land or a piece of land bordering Morocco owned by Spain with its people, Spanish nationals. So the story is there was fake news on social media and rumor that people can go into Spain through Ceuta and they will not be deported because Spain is offering some form of asylum. And all of a sudden, over 70,000 Moroccans migrated, swam, because there's a way the border was designed, they went across, people died in the water, all kind of craziness. You overwhelmed the people in Ceuta, and there was nothing the police or border authorities could do to stop them. It was all over the news. It was crazy. It was rowdy. But the way the news, because the thing is how that triggered EU meeting, how that triggered, the conversation about immigration and border control, which is already being intensified globally and in Europe. Like we'll be talking about, America, we're talking about North America. We've talked about Europe on this our channel a lot. And this just resulted to that emergency meeting, more, strict border rules, more, just more and more of what was already being done. And so, but the reality is that these people did not leave the continent of Africa. Just to help many of our viewers who have also heard that story that may not understand that these people did not leave the continent of Africa. They were still on the continent, even though they were in Spain, because Spain owned a place in Africa. And to be candid, a lot of people in the world did not even know about this.
Yeah, I didn't know that either before this story came out. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that. A lot of people did not know. Like I was shocked when I heard that, because I also thought people cross. Like, how did they cross? How did they swim across to Europe? Like it's not close. That's also what you want. Basically, Wale, what they did is, this is the land. There's a wall. This is water in front of my hand. This is water, and the border goes beyond, the land to the water. So people swam across. That's what happened. People swam across the border. They went to the water, swam across. Like, it's not like people were swimming. The way they made it look, people were swimming from Africa. Man, the way the media reports story, it was as if people were swimming from Africa across. No, they just went across the border. Some people jumped over the fence.
But I'm trying to understand why. First of all, like, how come there are 70,000 people?
So that's crazy. So there's so many angles to this story, Wally. Personally, not personally, but just looking at the story, I'm just looking at it from different, because what direction do we want to start this conversation? To get whatever direction you want to go, there's enough meat for you to chew on. You get that's the reality of this whole thing. Whichever direction. If you want to think about it from the people of Morocco, I didn't know people were suffering like that in Morocco, that they needed to leave Morocco that much. That's one. Then there's also another angle of, we didn't know that Spain owned, like, Europe still owned land in Africa.
Exactly.
We didn't know that. A lot of people in Africa did not know. The world did not know that. That exposed it. Is there a political agenda to that, to expose it? So there's so many.
Yeah.
That's why I say there's any angle you want to take, there's enough meat to chew on.
Yes, it's crazy, but again, it just shows you how far misleading news can really make people go crazy. I'm pretty sure it has something to do with the recent law by Spain to legalize 500,000 immigrants that were already in Spain.
Well, that's not new. That's not recent news. That's been have announced that since like maybe
I'm not saying that it's recent. I'm saying that someone who has a bad intention will use that as a premise to say, "Oh, look at what happened this time. They want to do it again." Right? In general, like people that lie well, very very well, they mix in the truth in there. So they will use the truth of something like this. Spain is legalizing 500,000 migrants. Now, if you are here, if you can just get into Ceuta, don't worry, you'll become Spanish. So it's unfortunate that you have that much people from Morocco that want to be there.
I said for
the
me,
border has been there for a very long time. They never crossed it. They never crossed it. Why is it that it's now that they are crossing it? So for me, there's something that smells very, very fishy with all this situation.
Yeah, there's a lot of this. Like I said, there's so many angles to this to consider when you think about the story. But that also brought to light that Ceuta is not the only place owned by Spain in Africa, on the continent of Africa. There's another piece of territory on the continent owned by Spain.
Oh, wow. There's even more.
Yes. That's why I saw the story. I saw a report on it. I was like, really? And this
how does that even happen?
How do you explain that? Like, I just couldn't wrap it around my head. But it just makes you know, you just expose the fact that a lot's happening that people don't know. There's just a lot happening around the world that people don't know. There are countries calling the shots for other countries that we might not know about. Because for most of us from West Africa, I'm guaranteeing you, the world didn't know this to a large extent. But this just kind of exposed that, this is true. Like, for me, it's weird. Like, how do you explain that? How is it that Spain is also on the continent of Africa? So when we're listing out countries in Africa, we should also list out Spain. That's the way I see it. Like, Spain should be on that list. Countries in Africa.
That means Africa won the World Cup.
Exactly. Africa won the World Cup. Wale, you're on point. Africa won the World Cup. In short, I should make a short about this. World, please note, according to the news that came out in Ceuta, that for the fact that Spain won the World Cup, Africa won the World Cup. All right, then. That was just something, but I think we just went overboard with it.
Yeah.
So thank you all for joining us today, for staying tuned, if you've stayed with us up until this point, thank you. Going to stay tuned with us as we're going to bring you interesting, exciting, and educative content surrounding immigration across US and across the globe.
Thank you. We'll see you in the next one.
All right, then. Have a good one.